Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Think and Grow Rich Mastermind Live. My name is Dr. Peter A. James, and I want to welcome you to another phenomenal Saturday edition of this great show that allows us to dive on into Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. It is early Saturday morning, but we are happy to have you here with us. We're happy to have you diving on into this conversation. And not only is it just myself and the angels of today, we have a very, very special guest, that's going to allow you to reflect on you, your business, and even your life overall. So without further ado, I want to bring in our distinguished angels. Start off with angel number one, Galen Bingham. Good morning to you, sir. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Always looking forward to this conversation. And this principle in particular, organized planning, seems to be the engine behind everything that we say that we want to do someday. And I think the author even says that we all wish for riches, we all wish for success. But there's a difference between wishing for wishes and success and actually putting the things in place that will realistically lead to success and riches. And so that's what this principle is about. And I can't think of a better guest than the one that we're going to be talking with today, because she's built an entire business around not only what should you be thinking about to lead to realistic success, but how should you do it, right? Who are the people that you should have in place, and what are the metrics that you should be looking at to make sure that you're on that path? So I am personally looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. It's going to be exciting, especially as we reflect on our own businesses, Galen. That's going to be very insightful. But those of you who are following along with us, have been with us for a long period of time, you know that we go through each chapter each month. We are in chapter 6 this month, which is organized planning. And in this organized planning chapter, Napoleon Hill says, the most intelligent individual cannot succeed in accumulating money or in any other undertaking without plans, which are practical and workable. And we have someone who is Miss Workable Plans. She's also the master wealth builder. Good morning to you, Ann McNeil. How are you doing this morning?
Listen, if I were any better, I would be Melinda today. So I'm doing great. I'm excited, like all of our guests. Melinda, we're going to introduce you, but I would tell you, as one of the guests that has had the highest interactions when we post the JPEG for this podcast today, it has just been phenomenal in the responses that we have received from your raving fans. And actually, I think one of your raving fans are right here on this co-host with us. We'll figure out who that is between the three of us as the podcast goes on. But it's exciting to talk about organized planning. And as Napoleon Hill tells us, one of the ways to have an organized plan, you must have a mastermind group of accountability or an individual holding you accountable. And as we begin to discuss with our guest today, you will find that she is an awesome accountability partner for you, even virtually, with all of her books and resources that you can connect with. So as always, let's get this party started.
Let's get this party started there, Ann McNeil. Yes, for sure. And folks, without further ado, let's introduce the small biz lady, Melinda F. Emerson. She is America's #1 small business expert. She is a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, a marketing expert. As CEO of Quintessence Group, her marketing consulting firm serves Fortune 500 brands that target small businesses. Her advice is widely read, reaching more than 3 million entrepreneurs weekly online. She has an online school, www.smallbizladyuniversity.com. She'll talk about that, and host the Small Biz Chat podcast. She is the best-selling author of Become Your Own Business in 12 Months. Without further ado, Melinda, good morning to you. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that gracious introduction, Peter. And I'm just really excited to be here with all of you and just kind of talk about the principles of Napoleon Hill. That book was written so long ago, and so much of what he said still rings true today. So I am thrilled to be here with you all.
Exciting to have you here with us there, Melinda. We also want to see how, Think and Grow Rich has been a mainstay in your life overall. But before we even go into that, tell us a little bit about your background, if you could, maybe the 30,000-foot view, because I know it's very vast. I've been watching you for a long time, following you. I think early on in my entrepreneurship journey, now I'm starting to date myself and probably date you as well, forgive me. So early on in my entrepreneurship journey, you were definitely a mainstay in my life as far as following, so watching what you were doing on social as well as on YouTube for that matter. So give us a little bit of background if you could.
Sure. I started out my career actually as a television producer. I went to Virginia Tech undergrad, majored in broadcast journalism, and at 23 years old, ended up in my dream job in a television station in Philadelphia. But what I learned from that experience is you got to be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. Right. So I ended up with my dream job and I hated it. And I was like, Lord, I know I am meant to do something other than this. I am more talented than this. And so at 26 years old, I left broadcast television, basically with a laptop, a fax machine, and a dream, and my Rolodex off of my desk, and started my company Quintessence Group 24 years ago. And I will tell you that, starting a business is a spiritual journey as much as a circuitous one. But I have been blessed beyond measure, because I have been able to, even in business, reinvent myself several times. So when I first started out in business, I was a video production company, because what would a former television producer do, right? But what was interesting is that I always stayed on top of trade journals and industry information. And I remember in 2007, I read a trade journal that said social media was going to be the next big thing. It was going to revolutionize marketing and business in every way. And I decided at that moment that I was going to push all my chips in the middle on that, and that I was going to figure out how to become a black belt in social media. And literally how I did that was by building the Small Biz Lady brand. And so how I even became the Small Biz Lady is actually kind of a little funny story. When I first wrote this book over my shoulder, Become Your Own Boss in 12 Months, I wrote it in 2008, turned it into my publisher as I was assigned September 1st, 2008. And then you guys remember the market crashed like September 14th, 2008. So my publisher called me up and said, thank you so much for being a first-time author that actually turned your book in on time. But we don't think anyone is thinking about entrepreneurship right now, and we're going to bump your book for 18 months. That book did not come out until March of 2010. And I was sitting up here like, holy macaroni, Batman, what is we going to do? Because at this point, I had wound down my production company thinking, oh, I'm about to go on this national book tour because I'm about to become America's #1 small business expert. Well, not so fast. So basically, I had nothing, and it was a recession. It wasn't like I had my $10,000 to buy my book back from these people, so I had to wait. But a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, said, listen, if I were you, I would start publicizing that book like it is coming out anyway. And I would get on this social media thing because it's starting to get kind of hot. And that was when I remembered the trade journal I had read, and it was like, all right, well, I don't have anything else to do, so let's do that. So a friend of mine who was a publicist at the time, who knew as much as anyone knew about social media, because remember, Twitter was 1 year old in 2008. So we go to Twitter. I'm on the phone in front of my computer. She's on the phone in front of her computer. I put in Melinda Emerson, and I get this nice little note back that said, this name is already taken. Now, you guys know, I was like, are you serious? Melinda is not a common name. My name was never on the keychain at the gas station growing up. You guys know my name. I probably met 6 other Melindas in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, my name is not common. But for some reason, somebody else named Melinda Emerson had gotten to Twitter before me. And so in that instant, we had to come up with a nickname for me. And I was just like, a nickname. I've actually never had a nickname. People have always just called me Melinda. And so my girlfriend was like, well, let's think about it. Let's think about it. And then finally she came out with Small Biz Lady.
Mhm.
And I was like, I think I can be her. And I will tell you guys, that fateful day in November of 2008 turned out to be one of the best branding things that ever happened to me, because there are thousands upon thousands of actual coaches and so-called coaches, but there is only one Small Biz Lady. And I built my brand from Twitter. And not only did I build my brand, but I also built Small Biz Chat, which for 10 years was a live tweet chat on Twitter, which 4 years ago we transitioned to a podcast.
Mhm.
So I will tell you that it doesn't feel like it, but sort of like every kick is a boost. It was definitely a kick. It was definitely hard. But by the time my book came out, I had 10,000 followers on Twitter. And that really catapulted me. And for 18 months, I was just helpful to people. I answered people's small business questions. I shared personal things about myself. I shared other articles written by other people, because in the early days, I didn't even have a blog. So I was just sharing other people's information because, I didn't even have a blog back then. But it all worked out. It was all part of God's plan for me. And by 2010, I was America's #1 small business expert, Googleably. So it's been such a blessing. Become Your Own Boss in 12 months has been in print for 13 years with
Wow.
Simon and Schuster. It's in its 3rd edition now.
Wow.
So it's been published in multiple languages around the world. So I will just tell you that God is good all the time, and his timing is not our timing, but he's always right on time. And I'm a living testimony to that.
Good stuff. Exciting. Wow. What a journey. What a path. And you've been doing it. I know we have some folks here on the show. And also those of you who are watching, we would love to hear your questions, actually read your questions for Melinda. But before we go into that, Melinda, and also our angels here, Galen, I was wondering if you could take us to this book, this phenomenal book that is in the backdrop here, and these 13 principles. Can you lead us into that a little bit?
Absolutely. This is a book that is actually, it's probably the only book, one of the only books that could cause me to want to get up at 5:30 every Saturday morning to discuss. And it's because of how timeless these principles are, as Melinda just explained. And then also how well these principles connect together. If you were to take any one of these principles, you could write an entire book on just any one of these principles, and many have done so. But when you listen and watch this video, I'd love for you to think about how these all connect together, and how organized planning really is the fire, the engine between how do you make your dreams come true. So let's jump into this video, and we'll see you on the other side.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the Mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
Well, there you have it, all 13 principles. And that's kind of the backdrop, not only for the book, but for this conversation. So, Peter, I'll turn this back over to you and Melinda.
And I'm going to kick it right back to you, Galen, about these questions. I know we have the small biz lady here with us. What are your questions relative to the book, relative to business in general? Galen, we could be here all day with her.
Oh,
right?
my gosh, I could have a one-on-one conversation very easily. And so that really is the foundation for my question. I know a lot of people who are great at baking pound cake and they decide they want to open a bakery, or they're great at singing a song and they decide, hey, look, I want to actually get into a record company deal. And there's a big difference between passion and actually creating a business. How do you bridge the gap between nurturing someone's passion and then walking them through the steps, the planning, all the things that go into actually standing up a business, because that's at the core of organized planning?
So I have to tell you, it's my belief that passion is one of these sadly overused words in business. It is not about passion. It is about purpose. I mean, honestly, you have to figure out your mission, your vision, and then what your passion is for that. And all of that together becomes purpose. It's your why. Why are you starting this business? Who are you serving? And how is it that you're going to be able to stand out in the marketplace amongst all the other people trying to serve the same audience? If you can't answer those questions, you got to go back to the drawing board. And there's a big difference between making great cakes and running a bakery. Like, the skill sets are completely diametrically opposed. And I tell people all the time, I said, please don't start a restaurant because you like to eat. Start a restaurant because you know something about running a restaurant, right? So I think it's about a lot of times when I coach entrepreneurs, I tell them, I want you to evaluate your business idea based on what skills you have versus what skills you need to run this particular business. Because I think, it's like everybody wants to be a boss, like until they actually become one, until they actually have to make payroll and figure out how to pay for their family's health insurance. And they'd be like, uh-oh, maybe I didn't calculate this correctly, or maybe I quit my job too soon. And that's another thing that I talk about too. Do not quit your job to start a business. Unless you are competing head to head with your employer, be a side hustler. Figure out what you're doing on somebody else's dime. It typically takes 12 to 18 months for people to even get their sea legs in business. So you do not need to be quitting nobody's job while you're going through that metamorphosis process of becoming a big boy or big girl business, because it's a lot. There are 12 different elements of a business that you have to be on top of, any one of which can clothesline you on any given day. So you really have to do your research, do your homework, maybe go work part-time for a business like the one you want to start, so you can really see. I see a lot of times people who are executives get sold franchises. So they go from being a knowledge worker every day in a corporate setting to locking and unlocking the door at a retail food-based business. And then 2 years later, they're calling me, want to know, can I help them find somebody to buy this franchise? They hate it. Their dishwasher didn't show up and they became the dishwasher, and dragging 50-pound bags of sugar in the back door sucks, right? And it's like, gosh, if you had just spent one day in a franchise with another franchisee or talked to 3 or 5 of them, you would have known something about this business more than whether or not you could afford it. And I think that people don't understand the manual labor involved in any business, especially before you get to the point where you can really hire help. And so I'm a big proponent of research, homework, and working for somebody else so you can really understand what it is to run that type of business.
Well, I said that we could have a one-on-one conversations. I didn't anticipate we'd get so personal so quick because I did that very thing, right? It's like 30 years in corporate America in food service industry, working with food service companies and executives, bought into a franchise because it's supposed to be easy. And at the end of the day, after 6 years, I only lost $250,000. So, I barely had the first $250,000. I certainly don't have the second. So now we've got the foundation for why this principle is so important. Peter, I'm going to turn this back to you, man, because I might start crying. She's starting to relive.
It got hot in here real quick.
It's getting warm. It's getting warm.
All righty, good stuff. Thank you so much for even giving us that insight there, Melinda. I'm going to pass it over to Annie because I know she also is, we look at her as the business, the master wealth builder expert. Love to hear some of your questions for Melinda this morning there, Ann.
Wow, thank you. I want to first start with a confirmation, Melinda, similar to Galen, but I did what you suggest. And because of reading Think and Grow Rich in 1979, I decided to leave my job in 1980, but I didn't leave. I did what the book said to do, and that was start a mastermind group of accountability, vet some things, study the industry you want to get into, and do all of those things. And then I went to work for the largest construction company, Black, in the US, to learn how to own my own construction business before I started my business. And I stayed on his job until my business, I have a test. My test was to well, first, let me go back. So I did that, but then I left my job too soon. After I went to work for the construction company, I had to beg the job back. Right. But the second time I left, my business was, my second time I left that job, I had revenue to where I had to pay the IRS $250,000. And my CPA suggested I give it as a bonus to my employees as an expense. And that is when I knew, after saving a year's salary, that I could afford to leave my job. But exactly what you share in your book, it is a process, and it takes years after the decision is made. But let me get to my question. In view of what the author talks about with organized planning, can you share with us a struggle, a problem, or a challenge that you've had to overcome with this principle of having organized plans in place?
Oh, sure. Because you can have your plans all you want to, and then, reality, what does Mike Tyson say? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? I mean, and frankly, the recession of 08, 09 punched a whole bunch of people in the mouth. And so did the pandemic. For me, something that happened to me that was completely unexpected in 2008. In 2008, my business was doing pretty well. My husband at the time was able to leave his job at GE and come into our business full time. We had offices in downtown Philadelphia. We had about 9, 10 employees and another, 5 or 6 freelancers that work for us. But in 2008, the bank sent a demand letter to my house demanding the full amount of our line of credit with 10 days notice. For no reason. I mean, we had never missed a payment. We weren't negative cash flow. We weren't anything. But literally, basically, they was about to shut my business down. And if it were not for a fact that summer, the National Black MBA Conference had been in Philadelphia, and I had met the highest ranking Black woman at my bank. Her name was Kelly Finch. I'll never forget her. I had to call Kelly to get these people off of me. And I had to call the people at the SBA. But basically, they turned down our line of credit and made it a loan instantly and said to me that if I missed one payment, they would call the loan. This is, and I was not delinquent, there was no cause for this. But do you know what they told me? They said, you guys had never missed a payment, but you only ever made interest payments. You never made a principal payment in 1 year. And because of that, we can snatch your line of credit. Yes. And I was like, look, I can walk in the bank and write a $5,000 check to you right now today. They were like, you should do that, but we're still going to term out your line of credit. And that was nothing that I had ever planned for. That was, our business was doing fine. We were making paper, like it wasn't, but we needed that line because all of our customers are corporate customers. And y'all know, corporations, the bigger they are, the slower they pay. So sometimes we were getting paid net 45, net 60, sometimes net 90. So we needed that line of credit to float all that stuff. Giving a no interest loan to a major corporation. Don't get me started on that. But anyway, my point is, for me, that was the most caught flat-footed kind of thing I ever could have anticipated. And then what happened consequently to that was they were like, well, how much can you pay a month? And so before I paid the mortgage at our house, bought groceries, paid the babysitter, I had to pay them with the threat of if I missed one payment, they would call the loan again. And we had an SBA guaranteed line with a lien against our house. So calling the loan was like, wait a minute, we're going to lose our house over, $100,000. Like, that's ridiculous. So the point is that you kind of always have to prepare for things that you don't even anticipate could come for you. And in my case, the recession was at the very beginning when this happened. Like, they hadn't fully declared that it was a recession, but I knew something crazy was happening because there was no reason for a bank to just start snatching people's lines of credit. But I wasn't the only person I knew that had happened to. And so I think, in business, all kinds of stuff can happen. And that's why you always need, cash reserves and great relationships with your customers, because in times of tight economic times, sort of like what we're in now, you got to keep your customers. Like, your customers are the revenue can solve a lot of problems. So You have to stay close to your customers. You have to talk to your customers. I had a customer when that happened that I went to and told the truth about what was going on. And he gave us a contract that made sure I could pay that bill every month for 2 years. And so, if you're willing to be transparent and honest with people, people will step up and help you, but I think sometimes, you can't tell everybody your business, right? But you do need to be strategic when you need help and not sit up here and lose your house because you were too prideful to ask somebody for help. And so that is something that happened to us that could have been devastating to us when in fact we survived it. And I remember when I went in the bank and paid the last payment on that loan, it was $10,731.54. And I remember when I asked the lady, how much was it? And I gave it to her and I said, and please close all of my accounts in this bank. I don't ever want to do business with you people again.
Wow.
Great story there, Melinda. You had me at net 90. So my stomach started doing something inside of me here a little bit. I got a question about organized planning now in light of what you've been through. But before I get to that, we have some questions from our audience coming in, and those of you who are watching on YouTube or even here as our panel guests for sure. Here's a question from Don Lee, who's a longtime listener for sure. And you mentioned purpose earlier there, Melinda. And Don Lee says, how do you define purpose? What are 2 or 3 organized steps that a person can take to utilize purpose for their business moving forward?
Well, I think when it comes to purpose, there's a lot of things you have to consider, and passion is actually last on that list. So you need to consider, what is your mission? What is it that what is the big picture mission you're trying to accomplish with your business? And then the second thing you've got to think about is, what is your vision for this business? And then you consider what your passion. But without thinking about who the customer is and how you're going to serve the customer, passion is just passion. Like, I'm passionate about music. I sing in the praise and worship team at my church, but I am not going to audition for The Voice. You understand? I'm very passionate about music. I love praising the Lord, but I'm not doing that as a profession, right? So you have to get really clear about how your passion is actually a business. Because there's people who always want to tell me, I love people. I'm passionate about people. Okay, that's great. How are we turning that into an actual viable business that's going to support you and your family financially? I just think people ride on passion. Yeah, you have to love what you do, because if you don't love it, people can tell. But it's like a marriage. Love ain't the only thing you need. Right? You know what I'm saying? So you really have to think about, how am I going to serve a specific audience with this business? That is what purpose is. Your why story. Why are you doing this? That's the passion is like this superficial thing down here. It's like, it's almost like an emotion that can lie to you, right? So you want to get granular about details and audiences and competition and who you're competing with and your unique value proposition and how you're going to stand out in the marketplace. All of that goes into purpose, because that's when you can get clear. And the other thing too is, sometimes if you don't know what your purpose is, you can pray and ask for God's guidance in finding it. And that is something that happened to me also in 2007. Before I wrote Become Your Own Boss in 12 months, before I became the small biz lady, I prayed and asked God what was his next vision for me. And it took 2.5 months, but he showed me a vision and a dream 3 times to become America's #1 small business expert. And then he moved every mountain out of my way to make it happen. And so that book, Become Your Own Boss in 12 months, I didn't have an agent. I didn't have no book proposal. I had 4 chapters and a table of contents, and ended up on the phone with a man that was a book editor one day. And I mailed it to him and he bought my book. I had no email list. I was not the small biz lady back then. I was a Black girl with an idea. And I wrote the book I had never read. And they bought it, and it's still in print 13 years later. So I will also tell you that if you're searching for your purpose, there is somebody who can help you find it. Right. You got to know how to hear him. So I will also throw that out there too.
Good stuff there, Melinda. Thank you so much for answering that question from Donnelly. Folks, not only will you get business and organized planning advice, you'll get some relationship and faith advice here, a little bit sprinkled in too. You mentioned the hardships, the roadblocks, obstacles, and hurdles you went through, especially around the 2008 time. What does organized planning look like for you now in light of what you've been through, in light of even that scenario with the bank as well? What does it look like for you in 2023, now just coming out of a pandemic and moving forward?
Well, I think it's always about planning, right? During the pandemic, a lot of us had a lot of time on our hands, right? So that was a good time to reflect and plan because nothing was going on. So for me, what I thought about when all of these businesses went out of business, 40% of African-American businesses were gone by May of 2020. That's how fast the pandemic took people down. And I remember sitting at home and being like, okay, well, I'm the small biz lady. There's got to be something I can do about this because it broke my heart, obviously, to see so many businesses go out of business. And what I decided to do was build my online school. I built Small Biz Lady University, and I built it based on the skill sets that I saw people didn't have. So, for example, people didn't know how to market and sell online. People didn't understand social selling. People don't know how to effectively use email and sales funnels and all this stuff, especially people who've been in business 15, 20, 25 years. They don't sell it on the internet. Please, they didn't even have a LinkedIn account, right? So for me, what I stood back and did was, well, what could I do to make sure this doesn't happen again? What can I do with my skill sets to support folks? And that is what created a whole new, line of business for us. And I developed university level courses and was able to license my courseware to Drexel University, my alma mater, and also, working on partnering with some of the HBCUs to teach this. Because here's the other thing, they're not teaching this stuff in colleges either. So I realized that there was an opportunity to fill this gap, this knowledge gap that's out here that's really just based on technology that people didn't even know. And so that's what, the pandemic did for me. It was finally time to sit and reflect. Instead of being on go every day, it was like, well, since me and my son here going to school together, he's at the other end of my kitchen table, right? I was like, I got to figure something out. And so the Lord put on my heart to build Small Biz Lady University. And we have been very, successful with that.
Very, very cool. I want to bring Ann McNeil back into this conversation. And, we have had a lot of talk around masterminds and surrounding ourselves with the right people, ensuring that we're having this right conversation for sure. Would love to pass it over to you and also to talk about our annual meeting that we have on a regular basis and maybe even your insights into what Melinda has been sharing with us, blessing us with to a certain extent.
Well, I thank you so much for the question, Belinda. I'd like to ask if there is a favorite book that you like, because we like sharing resources with our listeners. And I love to read, as you could probably tell from my backdrop that is real. And so oftentimes our guests have phenomenal books. One of my favorites, my favorite is, of course, the book, the Bible. But then after that, it is this book, Think and Grow Rich. But if you can share with us a favorite book, and then afterwards I'll discuss and share with our audience our annual meeting that we host for your life. And I had to learn that my business was only one small part of my life. And my name is not MCO Construction. My name is Ann McNeil. That's another story for another day. But what's your favorite book next to the first two I mentioned?
Oh, man. I'm a book person, too. Like if you saw my library, you would be like, Lord, how can I pick? Well, I actually have two books that I think are very pertinent to this conversation. And one of them is a book called Profit First by my college classmate, Mike McCallowitz. He and I went to Virginia Tech together. And that is a book that I think has revolutionized the way people look at their money in their business. And I love his book, and it is brilliant. Another book that I like, that I buy a lot and give to young people, is Disrupt You by Jay Samit. And I love this book because in it, he talks about in order to disrupt the world, the first thing you got to do is disrupt yourself. And I love that because he gives a framework for how to do that. And over the years, I've actually gotten to know Jay pretty well. And I really, really love this book because I love the concept behind, look at self first. And that's a lot of, Napoleon Hill's concepts as well. He was like, look inside, get some accountability partners to check you about what your thinking is. And Jay Sama's book is almost like the updated version of this. It's right along the same lines. And so I'm a big fan of both of those books.
All right, thank you. Well, we host an annual meeting for your life. So think about this for a moment. Imagine if you had to go before a tribunal once a year, and that tribunal would determine if you received another 365 days based upon how you kept the last 65 days in comparison to what your goals and mission and vision that you set for your business and your life. Well, we host an annual meeting for your life every year on behalf of the International Mastermind Association. And it's not a conference. There's no keynote speakers. There's no breakout workshops. There's no conference bags or any of those things, because each of us must bring our life in writing in 10 different areas. Your goals for spiritual, family, financial, education, health, personal development, your business or your career, your recreational, your civic, and your creative goals. And we encourage you to write those goals for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And for me, I'm in my 45th year of doing this. And it is life-changing, but it allows us to have an accountability for our life. So we want to encourage everybody to join us. Our registration early bird will be ending the end of this month, the end of June. And you can go to International Masterminders with an S.com to get the details. The event will be held on January 5th and 6th, 2024. And we have a special surprise. It's a special location. Yes, a special, awesome surprise for everybody. But we do want to encourage everybody to go ahead and register. And we can bring your family. We encourage you to bring the families. And for me, right now, we're like on the 3rd generation, and that's my granddaughter in the middle. Mm-hmm. And she also masterminds with a group of children on Sundays. My daughter and my other grand have been doing this now for over 25 years. And so now children are having children, then bringing their families. So this is an exciting opportunity for us to be accountable for our life. So those are the details about our annual meeting for our life. And Melinda would definitely would like to encourage you to join us and bring your family in January.
Well, thank you for that gracious invitation. I'll have to look at that.
Yes.
Yeah. I love the fact you're like, ain't no keynote speeches. Ain't no bags. We just doing the work up in here. Don't be.
But that's it. Think about the work that you do. Like you said, so often we jump into these ideas and these businesses, but we don't necessarily have a written plan. So, your book does an awesome job of laying out a plan for 12 months. Now, imagine if a person had a plan that they wrote out for 12 months for their life, the rest of their life.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because even in my book, Become Your Own Boss in 12 Months, the very first thing I talk about is life planning.
Yes.
I'll talk about business planning first, and then, because I think you need to figure out what you want and why you want it first, because sometimes you might just need to get another job because you got a jerk boss. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to get out here and build some business from scratch or buy a franchise or whatever. Sometimes you have to look at what is really making you unhappy and what is it that you're prepared to do? Because starting a business is a whole lot of work. Writing a book is a whole lot of work, right? So you need to figure out, like, what is it that you want and why? And what is it that you still need to learn? What makes you laugh? what do you love to do? What would you do for free? Right. And so those are the things that I walk people through before we even start talking about business, because I agree with you. People leap and then, oh, I know what I want to do. I want to be like you, Melinda. I want to start a business. And I'd be like, but you love Louis Vuitton. I don't really think you're ready to recoil your lifestyle to the degree. I mean, because let's be real, right? Starting a business, there is an upfront hazing process involved, and it goes on for about 3-4 years until you figure out what you're really doing and can take a paycheck every time. A paycheck can be taken. I mean, it takes a minute, and so you got to be clear that you're ready to go through all of that. And most people have no idea. And then they get to the other side, they'd be like, Lord, if I knew all of this, if I knew it was going to be like this, I never would have left that job. I would have came to work with smiles and donuts for everybody. So again, I think that you have to understand who you are, because you're going to be pushed and pulled in ways you never considered. And I think that, you're going to be different on the other side of it. So you have to make sure that you're ready for the journey. Right, because it is truly a journey. But I also want to say too, I love mastermind groups. I have an amazing bunch of women that I'm in a mastermind group with, and it has been invaluable to my business and my life. I also have a coach that I work with who coaches me, because every coach needs a coach, right? So I have a lot of people that pour into me and love on me and will check me too, right? When I can come up with it, because I can come up with some grandiose ideas. I have champagne taste, so I can come up with some stuff, and they'd be like, Melinda, why do you feel like you need to do that? I think everybody needs a good business friend to be like, girl, that ain't it, right? So I just applaud you guys on all of this and keeping up the principles of Think and Grow Rich. And I was actually telling you guys even before the show started, my first introduction to Think and Grow Rich was actually Dennis Kimbrough's version. Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice was the first version of this book that I read. And I know that was over 20 years ago. I do have a copy of Napoleon Hill's book as well, but my first introduction was to that book, and I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad around the same time that I read Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. So, I mean, it's funny. It's like it's almost like that Dale Carnegie book, right? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. These books were written a long time ago, and what they wrote is still true, right? And so I think that sometimes you look at all this stuff that people write now, and it's like rehashes of all of that stuff. But I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity, to chat up with you guys about this today, because I just think it's so important.
Hey, I got to ask a question before we start trying to close, Peter. Because I'm always curious, and you've talked about my journey in a great amount of detail. I'm curious, when did Think and Grow Rich become more than just an interesting book to read? Because I know for me, the first book I read was Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. I read it in 2 days, which was unlike me, right? And then, I got into this. I heard that you're supposed to read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Kind of an interesting book to read. So I kind of read it as an interesting book. Certainly didn't put the kind of the kind of study and focus on it that I'm doing today. When did this book become more than just an interesting book to read for you?
Right before I wrote Become Your Own Boss in 12 months, actually. Whenever I get ready to write a book project, I go and look at the 5 to 7 books that are, monster books in the category. And I remember buying that book again because I couldn't find my copy, whatever. I got on Amazon and bought it again. And I remember going through it and looking at what he said as I was thinking about the Emerson planning system and what I wanted to design in my book. And so literally it was like 2007, 2008 was when I was kind of going through it and reading it and just remembering these principles that he had. Because they were brilliant then, and they're still relevant and brilliant now. So that was probably when.
Good stuff there. We are getting ready to have to land this plane, folks. This is the fastest hour of your Saturday. Galen, we're going to hit it back to you. First, before Galen gives us the information about himself, his ahas, and how we can stay in touch with him, I want to make sure that we thank those of you who are watching. Thanks, Monica, Wyman, Johnny, Doretha, Diane. Thank you so much for watching us and listening in on YouTube. And also those of you who are here with us, Charles, Donnelly, Patrick. Tell your friends, like and subscribe. Galen, what are some of your aha? Galen, I know you got, it's like a sauna in your office.
Oh man, I tell you, it is quite warm over here. This got really personal really quick. And I think it really just highlights, to Melinda's point, how universal these principles are, how enduring these principles are. And there are many versions, many books, many adaptations, many gurus that you can go to understand how to do a thing. But boy, the closer you can get to the original source, the more meaningful the information is going to be. And I just really loved how Melinda, through her stories, she hasn't even really necessarily talked about the book page per page, but her life has demonstrated the principles and the importance of these principles. And very often people will ask, what does it take to be a good guest? That's what it takes to be a good guest, to have done some things, to have lived, so that your life represents those principles. So my name is Galen Bingham. I am the leadership strategist. I help leaders bake success into their work and life. I am just so excited to be a part of this conversation. You can contact me in a variety of different ways. You can contact me on the web by going to killglobalcoaching.com. You can also contact me by going to my podcast, which is Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. We talk with leaders all over the world. We talk about the whiskeys they drink, the music they listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. And then my most recent project is responding to a lot of my clients wanting to understand, how do I think through these big goals that I have? And so I've created the hot sheet, and it's an online tool that will allow you to put some organized planning into bringing your dreams into reality. I am offering a 30-day free trial. If you go to hotsheetapp.com, you'll be able to learn more about the tool and how do you go from mindset to actual accountability, whether it's accountability with your coach, with your mastermind, or just self-accountability. I double dog dare you to try us just once. It is hotsheetapp.com. Back to you.
Good stuff there, Galen. Good stuff. Going to Ann McNeil. And we know you have some stuff going on in your life and that you want to share with us and your business as well. But what were your aha moments for today?
Let's see. I have 2, 4, 6, 10 pages. Where do you want me to start? Well, I'll start with the books. Melinda, thank you so much for both books, Disrupt You and Profit First. What can I do to support others? I love that. I love that, because after a while, it's really not about the money, to be quite frank. It's not about the money. Passion is not a profession. How is your passion serving your business? I mean, I could go on and on. I took a lot of notes, about the big picture, your mission for business, your vision for your business. I have a lot of notes here, even starting with the call before the call, the 20% versus your 37%. That's the big aha for me, my major takeaway from my click ratio, open ratio. You have been a phenomenal guest. I do have one question as we wrap up, and I'll just say, my name, for those of you that don't know, is Ann McNeil. I am the master. I am actually a builder, and that's who I am. I build lives, I build buildings, and I build communities. And as a part of getting clarity in my life about what's most important in my life, We host a Niche to Be Rich event on September the 6th, 2023. And for more details, you can go to my website at annmcneil.com. And yes, annmcneil.com. But Melinda, I really have another question for you. Don't want to spend a lot of time on myself. I really want to focus on having you share. You're going to share your information, but if you were to have a word that you would use to describe yourself, at the end of the day, at the end of your life, you'd like people to say that you were blank, what would that be?
Relentless.
Awesome. Relentless. Thank you so much. Relentless. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Peter.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for that one word response there, Melinda, which says so much though, but I'm going to pass the baton over to you, Melinda. Melinda, this has been a phenomenal conversation overall. Please share with our audience how we can stay in touch with you. How can we continue to see what's going on in your world if possible?
Well, certainly I am the small biz lady on every platform except for LinkedIn. I use my government name on LinkedIn, so Melinda Emerson over there. And for those of you that are interested in working with me, I am having an event in Philadelphia, September 21st through the 23rd, and it's called Brand in Demand Live. And I'm going to be teaching people how to elevate their brands so that their target customer will find them. So those of you that are authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, this event is for you. I'm going to be teaching you how to become a national brand so that you can stop chasing business and business will chase you. So my event is going on at smallbizladyuniversity.com/brand in demand live. Now, listen, my early bird registration ends on Monday. So if any of you are interested in coming to Philly, it's 2.5 days. The first day is really just a reception. So I'm going to be teaching all day Monday, all day Friday, and all day Saturday. I don't have a bunch of speakers. I'm teaching you. So I'm going to give you all of my secrets that I've learned in the 150 corporate brands that I've worked with. And I want you to get the spotlight that you deserve. And I'm going to teach you how to get it. So if you all want to head over to smallbizladyuniversity.com/brand in demand live, you'll have an opportunity to check it out and come hang out with me in Philadelphia. I know we got good food in Philadelphia. Y'all want to come see that. So thank you all for giving me an opportunity to share about that.
Fabulous there, Melinda. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a very exciting conversation around organized planning. This diving into who you are, diving into your journey, but sharing these gems that you have with us and our audience has been truly, truly phenomenal. We'll be so excited to have you back one of these days for sure.
Anytime.
Awesome stuff. This has been super fabulous. Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining us on another Saturday morning. My name is Dr. Peter A. James. I am the high performance coach helping you to shift your mindset. You can find me on any social media platform at Dr. Peter A. James. It's at DrPeterAJames, or as you see there at shiftyourmindset.com. Hey, folks, this has been another phenomenal episode of Think and Grow Rich Live. Please share with your friends, family, and colleagues. You have to come back because every week we dive into this text, but we have phenomenal guests just like Melinda here. Thank you all and see you next week. Take care.